class. And we will be taking, excuse me, please. Please confirm you can still hear me.
Yes, yes.
I
can
All
hear
right.
you. We can still hear you.
Yes, ma'am. We
Yes,
can
I
hear
can.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your responses. So
You're
our
welcome.
next trainer who will be
Hear you.
taking us. Please, can we mute our mics? Thank you. All right, so our next trainer will be taking us on ISO 20,000, talking about IT management systems. Please, everyone, our trainer currently, the one who will be taking us, we will really need to appreciate him for his time. He's currently going to be training us from the hospital. Thank you so much for your time. We are not taking this for granted. Please permit me to share my screen so I can read his profile. Thank you so much. All right, our next trainer who will be taking us for the second session of today's class is none other than Victor Udo. Victor Udo is an IT service management and IT governance professional with a background in computer science and practical experience in ISO/IEC 20000, 2018 ITSMS compliance and COVID 2019. His work focuses on service management implementation, risk assessment, audit preparation, and process improvement across organizations in the Nigerian financial sector. He has delivered professional training programs to practitioners from various organizations, and his expertise has been applied in supporting and auditing organizations implementing IT service management frameworks. He is known for his structured practitioner-first approach to consulting and training, and his commitment to helping organizations build compliant, efficient, and resilient IT service environments. Ladies and gentlemen, with a clapping of hands in the chat room, let's welcome our trainer who will be taking us on ISO 20,000. Thank you, Victor, for joining us. We really, really appreciate you for this time. Please, you can take it off from here.
All right, thank you very much, Mercy. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Loud
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
All right.
Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning, sir.
All right, thank you for joining this session today. So Mercy has done the introduction. So let's just go to the business of today. All right, so in today's world, before I begin, permit me to share my screen. Okay, let's see. I believe you can all see my screen.
Yes.
All right. So in today's world, I know we are in different organizations, right? Most of us are in different organizations, and our organizations depends on services more than ever, right? We depend on IT support, we depend on network access, we depend on applications, cloud platforms, right? Depend on all various forms of services to keep the business running. Yet we have some organizations that still deliver these services inconsistently. For example, right, there's a customer that gets a fast, well-handled response, while you have another customer that is left waiting with no updates. Right. An example is, okay, there's an outage that is fixed, but nobody's investigating why it keeps happening. Right? When your service delivery depends on which staff member happens to answer the phone that day, your organization is exposed. Right? So this is exactly the gap that ISO 20000 comes in to close. Right? It gives organizations a proven international right to plan, deliver, monitor, and continually improve their services so that good service is not right. So your services are designed, managed, and repeatable. Right. So before we go any further, let me ask you, just thinking, right? You don't need to have any prior knowledge of the standard to answer this. So in your own words, what does good service look like to you? In your own words, what does good service look like to you? So whether that's an IT service or any organization you deal with as a customer, what does good service look like to you?
Okay. So Emmanuel is talking. For me,
Right?
good service will be a service that actually meets my need. Before talking about exceeding my needs, that meets my needs.
Okay. Mr. Emmanuel says a good service is a service that meets the needs, like his own needs. All right. Can I get any other response?
A good service.
Right.
Okay.
A good service meets the value it proposes, which I seek as a customer.
Okay. A good service meets the value. Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry about that. Can you please repeat
Excuse
yourself?
me, Victor. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, in order to maintain decorum, can we please raise our hands, then we can take it up one after the other. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I can see Mr. Loveday's hand is
Okay,
raised.
Dr. Lovedays, you can go ahead.
Doctor? Okay. It's like Dr. Loveday's is not okay.
Oh, I was muted by the host. Now I'm muted. Yes, a good service to me is meeting the value proposition, meeting the service value proposition as professed to meet my needs. Meaning, whatever that service was, the value it proposed that draws me to it must meet my need.
Okay. Yes, that is correct. Right. There are no wrong answers here. So let me just get one more person. One more. Who wants to go?
Okay, let's take Abdulatif.
All right. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ma. Thank you, sir. A good service is a type of service that meets my needs and exceeds my expectation as a consumer.
All right. Thank you very much.
And
Dr.
then we
Lateef.
still have some responses in the chat room.
Okay, let's check the chat room. Yes, Mr. Deji says it meets customers' expectations. Services should be available always. A service that gives you satisfaction when the service meets the requirements, timely delivered, and gives value for money. Yes, we are all correct, right? Thank you, everyone, for your responses, right? So that's a great starting point because everything we're going to look at today is just really a structured way of achieving all these things you've said, and all these examples of good services. ISO 20000 gives us the structured way of achieving that. All right, so let's begin with what ISO 20000 is. Right. ISO 20000 is the international standard for service management system, in short, SMS. Right. It specifies the various requirements for an organization to plan, establish, implement, operate, monitor, review, maintain, and improve an SMS. Right. So that your services consistently meet the agreed requirements and deliver value to your customers. All right, so ISO 20000 is the international standard for service management system. Right, it exists because your services, whether they are IT services, whether they are outsourced services, or whether they are internal support functions, right? It exists because these services are only valuable when they are managed consistently, right? Not just delivered occasionally well. And the standard gives us a structured, repeatable way, right, to plan, deliver, monitor, and improve these services. And this structured way, right, this structure is built on the PDCA cycle. That is built on the PDCA cycle logic. You may recognize this from other management standards like the ISO 27001 standard that was covered last week, the plan, do, check, act cycle. Right, so this is just the structure of the plan, do, check, act cycle. Your clause 4 to 7 can be classified as the planning phase, the clause 8, which is the do phase, the check phase, which is the clause 9, and the clause 10, which is the act phase. So we'll go through these 7 clauses. Clause 4, which is the context of the organization, clause 5, which is leadership, clause 6, which is planning, 7, which is support, 8, which is operation, clause 9, which is performance evaluation, and clause 10, which is continual improvements. And we'll cover this in that order, because this is the order that the service management system is actually built and run. And we'll spend most of our time in the clause 8 because that is where the standard describes the day-to-day service management processes, right, that most of you here will recognize from practice. So it's in the clause 8 you will see practices like incident management, how you manage changes within the organization, and so on. Right, so let's begin. Clause 4, context of the organization. So this clause is basically asking us, where does our SMS operate and who cares about it? Right, this clause is setting boundaries before anything is planned or built. So we have 4 subclauses under the clause 4. We have the clause 4.1 down to clause 4.4. So let's begin with 4.1. Right, so every management system standard begins the same way. If you're looking at the ISO 27001, you're beginning with the clause 4. If you're looking at 9001, which is a quality, you're beginning with the clause 4, right? Every management standard begins the same way by asking the organization to step back and understand itself before attempting to build anything. Right, so clause 4 is that step back moment. It exists to stop organizations from designing a service management system in a vacuum. Right? Designing a service management system that's disconnected from the realities of the business it's meant to serve. So clause 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. Right? The question you're asking yourself, what are the issues that can affect your organization to deliver services? So this subclause is asking us to identify the internal and external issues that are relevant to our organizations, right? And those issues that affect the ability to achieve the interior outcomes of our service management system. So if you're looking at internal issues like your organizational culture, the existing capabilities, or resource constraints. If you're looking at external issues, looking at things like regulatory requirements, your market competition, conditions of the economy, right? So the point is very simple here. You cannot manage services sensibly if you don't understand the environment those services exist in. Right. So when you're looking at clause 4.2 is talking about understanding the needs and expectation of your interested parties. Right. So here you're identifying who has a stake in the SMS. Right. Is it your customers, your users, your regulators, your suppliers, your internal business units? Right. So you're identifying who has a stake in your service management system and determining what each of them actually needs and expects. Right, so this matters because it's service management system that satisfies the standard on paper, but ignores what customers and regulators actually require has missed the point entirely. Right, your interested parties and their requirements become an input into everything that follows. Right, then scope. You're defining the boundary. Right, which services, which locations, which organizational units, or which parts of the service lifecycle are actually covered by the service management system. And finally, we have the 4.1, the service management system. So the standard is asking us to actually establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an SMS, including the processes needed for the service management systems and how they interact with each other. So the clause 4.1 is what will bridge into everything that follows from the clause 5 down to clause 10. Right, so if there's one thing I want you to take home from clause 4 is that before you plan anything, know your environment, know your stakeholders, right, and know exactly what your SMS does and does not cover. Right, before you plan anything, you can take this, you can jot it down. Before you plan anything, know your environment, know your stakeholders, and know exactly what your SMS does and does not cover. Now, clause 5, leadership. So the question you're asking yourself here, who owns this, right? And how do we know the minutes? Who owns this SMS and how do we know the minutes? Right, so if clause 4 is about understanding the landscape, clause 5 is about accountability. So we have 3 subclauses under the clause 5. Clause 5.1 is talking about leadership and commitment. Right, your top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to the service management system. For example, they must ensure that the service management policy and objectives are established and compatible with the strategic direction of the organization. Right, another example is that they should ensure that the requirements of the service management system are integrated into the business process, ensuring that the resources are available for the service management system to run. So top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to the service management system. And the next thing is to establish a policy, right? Not just establishing any policy, but establish a service management policy that is appropriate not to the purpose of the organization. Right? Establish a policy that provides the framework for setting your objectives. Establish a policy that includes a commitment to satisfy all requirements, and establishing a policy that includes a commitment to continual improvements. And this policy must be communicated. It must be understood and available as documented information, not just existing in the heads of someone or the employees. Right? It must be available as documented information. And finally, we have the organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So it is the role or the responsibility of top management to ensure that, okay, the various roles, responsibilities, and authorities are assigned and communicated within the organization. Right, so in practice, what this is talking about is that, okay, people should be able to answer who owns this process. Right? Who is accountable for this decision without any hesitation? So ambiguity in ownership is one of the most common weaknesses that auditors find in immature service management systems. So in clause 5, the take-home point here is an SMS survives on leadership commitment, not just documentation. Right? Policies without visible top management engagement rarely holds up in practice. So a take-home point here in the clause 5 is that an SMS survives on leadership commitment, not just on documentation alone. All right, now we go into planning. Right. Planning turns intent into action. Right? How do we turn what we want into a controlled plan? So this is where the organization now converts your good intentions into a structured plan of action. So you're introducing risk-based thinking here, right? Introducing this formal way of thinking into your service management systems, requiring that your objectives can actually be measured and tracked, rather than having aspirational statements with no way of knowing whether the objectives are actually being achieved. Now, actions to address the risk and opportunities. Stan is saying that your organization must consider the issues that you've identified in your clause 4. So those internal issues, right? The internal and external issues that you've identified in your clause 4, the requirements that you've identified from your interested parties, like consider all these things and determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed. Right. So this ensures that your SMS can achieve its intended outcomes, right? Prevent or reduce undesired effects and support continual improvements. So yeah, risk thinking here is proactive, right? You're addressing problems before they occur, not only reacting after the fact or after knowing that they have occurred. Then service management objectives and the plans to achieve them. Right. Your objectives for the service management system must be established at relevant functions and levels. And those objectives must be consistent with the service management policy. Right? They must be measurable, they must be monitored, communicated, and updated as appropriate. Right. So, aside from setting those objectives, you should also set the plans to achieve those objectives. Specify what you're going to do to achieve the objectives. What resources are going to be required to achieve those objectives? Who's responsible for the objectives? When will it be completed and how the results will be evaluated? Then finally, plan the service management system. Right. So when the organization determines a need to change the SMS, right, the standard is saying here that the change must be carried out in a planned manner. And you should consider what? Consider the purpose of the change and its potential consequences. Consider the integrity of the SMS. Consider the availability of resources, and allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authorities. So doing all this is going to prevent ad hoc or poorly considered changes to the service management system itself. Right. So let me ask a question before moving to the clause 7. Right. Think about your organization. Right. If something went wrong with a service today, is it clear who is accountable for fixing it? It's just a straight yes or no answer. If something went wrong with a service today, is it clear who is accountable for fixing it? So is it a yes or is it a no?
Hello, Victor.
Yes.
Okay, are you the one sharing the ChatGPT screen?
Oh no, I think someone has taken over. Let me share my screen again.
Oh, all right.
So you should be seeing planning.
You can see it now.
Okay. All right. So I asked the question. So think about your organization, right? If something went wrong with a service today, is it clear who is accountable for fixing it? We can go into the chat room and just type our answers there. So in your organization, if there's a service that went wrong, is it clear who's accountable? right? For fixing, who's responsible for fixing that service? Okay, Madam Judith said yes, sir. I think so. Okay, Mrs. Nika said yes, please. Okay. So that's a good sign that there is proper leadership in our organization, right? The roles and responsibilities have been assigned and communicated with various individuals. Now moving to clause 7, right? Support. So before we move into clause 7, there's one thing or a take-home point I want us to get from the clause 6, right? Planning turns awareness of risk into deliberate actions. Right? Planning turns your policy statements into objectives that you can actually measure. I hope you all took this down. Planning turns awareness of risk into deliberate action. And it does what? It turns policy statements into objectives that you can actually measure. Now, when we get to clause 7, clause 7 is talking about support. So the framing question in clause 7 is, what enabling resources make the SMS possible? So clause 7 covers the enabling resources that sit underneath everything else, right? People, the information, the communication and documented knowledge. So without all these things in place, you can have a well-designed SMS that will struggle to function consistently. So let me briefly take you through the entire clause 7. So 7.1 is talking about resources. And this is straightforward. The organization must determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, the implementation, the maintenance, and continual improvement of the service management system. So these resources include people, tools, infrastructure, information, and knowledge. Then we're looking at clause 7.2, competence. Right. Ensuring that the people doing the work under the SMS are actually competent. Ensuring that they're competent based on appropriate education, based on training, or based on experience. And we should retain evidence of that competence. Then when we get to 7.3, that talks about awareness. Right? The people working under the organization's control must be aware of the service management policy. Right? Be aware of the policy, be aware of their own contribution to the effectiveness of the SMS. And they should be aware of the implications of not conforming to the service management system requirements. Right? Communication. Determine the internal and external communications that are relevant to your service management system. Right? So what are you going to, or rather, what to communicate, when to communicate it, with whom you are going to communicate it to, how you communicate it, and who does the communication. So determine your internal and external communications relevant to your service management system. And it should be done based on these 5 things. What are you going to communicate? When are you going to communicate it? With whom are you going to communicate it to? How are you going to communicate it? And who does the communication itself? Then clause 7.5, documented information. The SMS must include documented information that is required by both the standard and the documented information that the organizations determine is necessary for the effectiveness of the SMS. So here, looking at things like creation, updating, and how you control your various documents and records. Then finally, knowledge. Right? The knowledge necessary for the operations of the SMS processes and services must be determined by the organization. Right? Maintain that knowledge and make it available where needed. Right, so here you are protecting your organization from losing, the critical know-how when people move on. So take home point here, support is the plumbing of the SMS, right? Support is the plumbing of the SMS. Right? It's invisible when it works, and it's the first thing that breaks the system when it's missing. Right? Support is the plumbing of the what? The SMS. Right, so now we move into clause 8. The core operations of the SMS, the largest clause of the standard. So the question you're asking yourself when you get to this sub clause, right? This clause is that how do we actually deliver services day to day? So clause 8 is where the SMS stops being a set of principles and becomes a living operation. Like I said earlier, it is by far the largest clause in the standard. And this is where most of the service management processes people are already familiar with. Like I said, incident management, how you handle service requests within your organization, how you handle changes and manage those changes, and many more. All right, so we'll move through these 7 parts in sequence, and we'll start from 8.1, which is on operational planning and what? Operational planning and control. So the organization should what? Plan, implement, and control the processes that are needed to meet the requirements for the provision of your services. Right? Plan, implement, and control the processes needed to meet the requirements for the provision of services, and to implement the actions that you've determined in your clause 6. Remember, clause 6 looked at what? Actions to determine the risk and opportunities. Right, so this includes establishing the criteria for processes, controlling your planned changes, reviewing the consequences of any unintended change, and ensuring that there's a sort of control to processes that are outsourced in your organization. Now, clause 8.2 is talking about service portfolio. We have 6 sub-clauses under this sub-clause. Right, so service portfolio, it's this part of the sub-clause, or this part of the clause is just a group of activities that governs the organization's services across their life cycle. So we have the 8.2 that's talking about that covers the various obligations for service delivery. 8.2.2 that's talking about how we plan our new or change services. 8.2.3 that's talking about how we control the various parties that are involved in our service life cycle. So parties like your internal units, your customers, your suppliers. And 8.24 is talking about how we create and maintain an accurate service catalog. Right. Under service portfolio, we still have how we manage the various assets that we use to deliver our services. And finally, configuration management. How we identify, control, and maintain accurate information about the various configuration items and how they relate with one another. So your service catalog contains all the live services that you provide to your customers, interested parties. Now, 8.3, relationship and agreements. Okay. So this part of this clause is covering how we manage relationships with our customers and suppliers. So business relationship management, that's 8.3.2. So this business relationship management builds and maintains a positive relationship with our customers. Then how do we negotiate, document and monitor our service level agreements, our various SLEs? How do we control suppliers whose services contribute to our service delivery? Then 8.4, it's talking about supply and demand. Right? How do we budget for our IT services? So this is the part of the surplus that's talking about that. As an organization, we ensure that we understand the cost of delivering services and we can plan financially. Right? This is the part of the surplus that is saying that we should anticipate and influence the customers' demand for services. This is the part of the surplus that says we should ensure that our organization has and will continue to have sufficient capacity to meet both the current demand and the future agreed demand. Right. So if your demand management is not done properly, you won't have a proper capacity management process because it's the output from your demand that feeds into your capacity management. If you don't understand the demand for your services, your customers' demand for services, how can you then plan your capacity to be able to meet those demands? If you don't know how your services or how many customers you're going to have in the next 3 months, how can you plan your capacity or your various resources within your organization to be able to meet that demand in the next 3 months? Now, when we get to 8.5, this is where we look at change management. Right? This is one of the most operationally significant parts of the clause. Right? Clause 8.5.1 is talking about change management. And change management controls all changes to the services and the SMS in a structured way. So you're assessing your risk, the impact and authorization before you begin to implement the changes. Right? The standard has categorized changes in 4 different categories. Right? We have what we call standard changes. So these are the pre-approved routine changes, or the changes that are low risk to us in the organization. Then we have normal changes. So these are the changes that are normal, or rather, they're not routine changes. They require a full where you have the change advisory board members who come and sit on, deliberate on the changes. Then we have what we call project changes. So these are the changes that have major or have the potential to have a major impact on the business and its services. Then finally, we have what we call emergency changes. So these are changes that need to be implemented as soon as possible to either maybe reduce the impact of a disaster or an incident. Now, when we get to 8.5.2, talking about the service design and transition process, how we plan for a new or change services, how we build those services, how we test those services, and how we transition it into our live environment. Okay? How we build the service itself, how we design, so how we plan for the new or change service, how we design the service, how we build, test it, and transition it into live operation. And finally, release management, release and deployment management, which controls how your new or change services and components are moved into live environments with minimal disruption. Right. So let me ask a question. In organizations, do you believe that change is controlled or do you believe that change is done in a structured manner? In our organizations, our various organizations, how is your approach to change? Do you say that someone just randomly makes a change in your configurations, or is a structured manner by which someone requests a change and that change is reviewed before it's approved? Wow. Okay. Anyone? Okay, let me see the chat room. All right, so Mrs. DK said sometimes no. All right, so yes, this is why the standard is here to create that structure so that this sometimes no will become yes all the time. All right, now we move into clause 8.6, which is talking about resolution and fulfillment. This is the part of the standard that most people instinctively recognize. So in here, the likes of how we manage incidents in our organizations, how we handle the various service requests of users, how we identify root causes of incidents. Right? Clause 8.6 houses those processes. So 8.6.1 is talking about incident management. And the main purpose of this incident management is to what? Restore back to normal operations when a disaster occurs. Okay. Restoring the services to users as quickly as possible after an unplanned interruption. Right. 8.6.2 is talking about service request management. How you handle this predefined low-risk requests from users through an agreed process. Now, let me take you back to our 8.5. We looked at change management. Now, I mentioned there were 4 categories of changes, right? I mentioned there was something called standard change, which standard changes are predefined, low-risk routine changes in the organization. Now, these standard changes sometimes or most of the time will be handled through the service request management process. Right. So let me give an example of what we can classify as a service request, which can also be classified as standard change. Right. We have a new employee right now in the organization, and we need to provision a user account, create a user account for that employee. Right. Now you won't need to go through the whole formal CAB approval. So CAB is the change advisory board, just consisting of those people who come together to either reject or approve any change within the organization. Right. So you won't need the approval of a CAB, right, to then just assign or create a user account for an employee. Right. So that there would have been a process that exists and has been formally approved. So anytime you have a new employee that comes into an organization that wants, okay, you need to create a user account, as long as that process, that predefined process is being followed, you won't need to obtain approval. That is where service request management comes in. Handling those predefined requests, those requests that are low risk from users. And finally, we have the 8.6.3 that talks about problem management. How we identify the root causes of incidents, particularly those incidents that recur, and working to prevent them from happening again. Right, so root cause analysis here. Right, how do we know, or how do we find out the underlying cause of this incident? So a problem is the underlying cause of one or more incidents, or the cause or potential cause of one or more incidents. Now, root cause analysis is now us trying to find out what is that underlying cause, rather than just finding out the surface symptom. Right, so there are various ways we can carry out root cause analysis. We have the 5 whys technique. So you're asking, okay, why did this incident occur? Right, this incident occurred because this happened. All right, why did this happen? So let's give an example. Here you have, let's say there's a mobile banking application that went down. The first question I was asking is, why did the mobile banking app fail? Oh, there was the database connection pool was too large. The next question you're asking yourself, why was the database connection pool full. So keep on asking yourself why till you get the final answer. Then we have other techniques. We have the fishbone diagrams. We have the Pareto analysis, that's 80-20% analysis. We have the fault tree analysis. So we have various techniques by which we can carry out root cause analysis. And the standard is saying here that we should identify the root cause analysis of the incidents that happen more than once, especially more than once in the organization. And finally, 8.7 is talking about service assurance. Right? The final part of plot 8 is just talking about how we protect the promises that were made to the customers. So those service availability targets, those promises you've made to your customers in your SLAs, right, in your contracts, service assurance or plus 8.7 is now ensuring that we protect those promises. How do we protect these promises? So this is where the service availability management process comes into place. Right. This is where the service continuity management comes into place. This is where information security management comes into place. As to service availability management, you're ensuring that your services meet the agreed availability commitments, right? The agreed availability targets. Right. So through monitoring, through planning, and through a proactive risk reduction. So the standard says here that before we even identify the requirements, you should identify the risks that can affect the availability of our services. Right. Now when we get into plus 8.7.2, service continuity management.
Excuse me, Victor.
Sorry? Yes, I can
Excuse
hear
me,
you.
Victor. Yes. Okay, so you are supposed to end the class by 11:30, but we will give you up to 11:40.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
All right. Thank you very much. Now we get into plus 8.7.2, service continuity management. So here we're preparing ourselves how to respond to major disruptions when they occur, and ensuring that we keep our critical services running or quickly restorable. Right. So also, before you even begin to do anything, you need to find out what are those things that can prevent our services from continuing when there's a disruption, when there's a major disruption. Right. Identify those things, identify the risks. Now, then establish what we call a service continuity plan. Now, after you establish it, you need to test it. How do you know your service continuity plan is working if you don't test it? Or is it when there's a major disruption that you want to then, okay, let's see if this thing is working, let's see if our plan is working, then it begins to fail. So you need to test it before you can even you need to test it so that you can be sure that your service continuity plan is working. It gives you that assurance that, okay, our plan is working. In the case there's a major disruption, we can invoke the service continuity plan. Right. And finally, 8.7.3, that's talking about the information security management. Right. So this process is then protecting the CIA of the information associated with your services, right? The confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the information that is associated with the services that you deliver. All right. So clause 8 is the SMS in motion, right? So everything we looked at from clause 4 to clause 7 exists to make clause 8 work reliably. So understanding your environment, right? Ensuring that top management is committed, right? Ensuring that there's proper planning to the service management system, right? Ensuring that the resources are available, right? There's support in terms of resources, information, documented information, or knowledge rather, All these things exist so that these 8 sub-processes we've looked at work reliably. All right. So now let me ask a question, right? So we've looked at processes in the class 8. We looked at incidents, we looked at problems, we looked at change. Okay. So let me ask a quick question. How would your organization actually know if all of these processes are working well? Right. So if you want to look at this, how would you, or what would you look at? So if you're looking at how incident management is being, how you handle incident management, how you handle changes, how would you know if changes or change management is being done properly or is working well? Okay. Who wants to try? Who wants to try? So should I repeat my question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I said we looked at the class H, right? We looked at incident management, we looked at chain management, we looked at service request management, we looked at service continuity management, we looked at various processes. So I want to just pick any of these processes, right? Look within your organization, and how would you know that this process is working well? So what are those things that you look at?
Okay, so sorry. I like to wait when someone goes to No, you hold on like 2 hours before you start. Right now, it's still going.
Did you get my question?
So after it's done,
Okay, I can see Mr. Emmanuel's hand is raised.
Question, you can react. Let's see your reactions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, okay. Mrs. Francisca says documented information. Okay, yes, apologies. I'm at the hospital, so we have nurses and doctors here. So that's why you're hearing some background noise. Apologies for that. So, yes, I can see Mr. Emmanuel's hand is raised. You want to say something? Please go on. Please proceed. You can unmute your mic if you want to speak. Hello, Mr. Emmanuel. Or restricted by host. Okay, you can type in the chat room as well if you can't unmute your mic. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Continuity management and compliance helps with this. Okay. Yes. Okay. Service continuity management. And how do you? So you said compliance helps you in ensuring that your services can continue. Well, auditing the process, exactly. Yes, auditing the process. Yes, that's one way we can know that these processes are working well, by auditing those processes. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel. Okay, so now a take-home point here in the class 8, right? Let's take this home with us. Let's jot it down. Let's write it somewhere. The SMS, or rather, the class 8 is now the SMS in motion, like I said earlier. Everything from your class 4 to class 7 exists to make class 8 work reliably. So now, class 4, from class 4 to 7, that is the plan phase. We looked at the plan phase. We just covered the do phase. Now we're going into the check phase, right? So class 9 is the check step of the plan, do, check, act, right? An SMS that is never measured, an SMS that's never audited or reviewed is not really a management system, right? It's just simply a collection of documents and good intentions. Right. So this clause forces us to then look honestly at our performance of our service management system. And it's structured into four, or broken down into four subclasses. The first is what? Monitoring, measuring, analyzing, and evaluation of the SMS. Right, so here you're required to determine what needs to be monitored and measured. The methods you are going to use to carry out this monitoring and measurement, when the monitoring and measurement will be performed, and finally, when the results will be analyzed and evaluated. So these things provide the evidence base for every other decision made about the SMS. So monitoring, measuring, analysis, and evaluation. Monitoring and measurement are two different things. Monitoring is a continuous process, right? You're continuously checking the performance of the SMS. The measurement is a scheduled activity. So is it every quarter? Is it every month? Check on the measurement of these processes, right? And check how well they've performed on a scheduled basis. Monitoring is a continuous process. Now, internal audit is another way of checking, is this SMS, is our service management system actually working? So here, the standard is saying we should conduct internal audits at planned intervals. Right. Conduct these audits to check whether the SMS conforms to the first thing is whether your SMS conforms to your own requirements. So the requirements you have set aside for your SMS as an organization, and also checking whether your service management system conforms to the requirements of the standard itself, which is the ISO 20000 standard. Okay, so check whether it conforms to these two things, these two requirements, and check whether your SMS is effectively implemented and maintained. All right, so our internal audits must be what? Objective and impartial, right? You can't have auditors who audit their own work. It doesn't work that way. Auditors need to be what? Objective, independent. And finally, it's talking about, before we go to the last subclause, management review. So what is management review all about? Saying that your top management should review your service management system at planned intervals. So is it yearly? Is it twice a year? Right. Review your SMS at planned intervals to ensure that what? It's continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. Review the SMS at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. So yeah, when you're conducting your management review, looking at things from your internal audit results, the feedbacks you've gotten from your interested parties, the various data you've analyzed, based on your performance, right? The various opportunities for improvement that you've identified, right? And Stan is saying that we should produce decisions and actions from these reviews, right? Not just a discussion, not just coming together to discuss about these things and we move on with our lives, right? We should produce decisions and take actions on those decisions. Then finally, 9.4. This is peculiar to the service management system because service ISO 20000 is the only standard that has a 9.4 that talks about service reporting. So here we are meant to do what? Produce service reports for interested parties. So you cover matters such as your performance against the objectives, have you achieved, or what's the performance against the SLA that you've set? Significant events, your trends in your incidents. Okay, how are we performing when it comes to incident management? How many incidents have we closed in the last quarter? Right. We should produce service reports for all these things for our interested parties. All right, I can see Mr. Mike has a question. Wow, you just talked about the impartiality aspect of internal audit and that they can be achieved when person A audits person B work. Another way is that they can also, yes, you're very correct, right? So the standard does not say that, your internal auditor must come from within the organization. The standard says you can actually outsource an external party to come and conduct the internal audit for you, provided that that person is independent from the work itself. So that person is not working within the organization's SMS. So yes, you can actually outsource an auditor to come and conduct internal audits for you. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Right. So rounding up on clause 9, right? Timely and accurate reporting is what builds that trust, that keeps your customers and stakeholders relationships healthy. Right. So a take-home point I want you to leave here with in clause 9 is, performance evaluation is what separates a management system from a policy binder. Let me put it that way. Performance evaluation is what separates a management system from a policy binder, right? It's what turns claims into evidence. Now let's look at the last clause in the standard, clause 10. Right. So clause 10 is what closes the PDCA loop. Right. So clause 10, you're asking yourself, how do we get better? Bro? Instead of just staying compliant, how do we improve our SMS? And the standard deliberately made this the final clause because improvement should be informed by everything that came before it, right? The context, the leadership commitment, the plans, the operational reality, and the evidence gathered through performance evaluation. So we have two subclauses here. Okay, see my time is almost up. Okay, so let's just round up with this. 10.1, non-conformity and corrective action, right? So when a non-conformity occurs, right, the standard is saying that we should react to that non-conformity, right? Then take actions to control and correct it. Then finally deal with the consequences, right? Should then evaluate the need for actions to eliminate the root cause of that non-conformity. So in this subclause, there's something we call correction and corrective action. Some people confuse correction from corrective action, right? So correction is what you do to fix that problem as at that time. So if a non-conformity is found, correction is good. Let us fix this non-conformity. Then corrective action is what you do to prevent that non-conformity from reoccurring. Right. So this part of the support is saying that, we should evaluate the need for action to eliminate the root cause so that the non-conformity does not reoccur or occur elsewhere. And finally, continual improvements. So at the end of the day, we need to ensure that we improve on a continual basis, not just remain stagnant after we achieve certification or after we've seen that we are complying with what the standard says, we are fine this way. No, the standard is saying that we should improve on a continual basis. So continually improve the suitability, the adequacy and effectiveness of your service management system and the services that it manages. Right. So this subclause, right, 10.2, is reinforcing that improvement is an ongoing discipline that is built into the management system, right? And it's not just a one-off project that ends once you've achieved certification. So clause 10, the take-home point here is that your improvement is not a punishment for failure. Improvement is not a punishment for failure, right? It's the built-in mechanism that keeps the entire SMS relevant over time. Right. So putting everything together in one line, clause 4 is talking about knowing your environment and stakeholders. Clause 5 is talking about leadership, top management owns and directs the SMS. Clause 6 is what it's talking about in one line, address your risk, set your objectives, and plan your changes. Clause 7 is talking about your support, provide people competence, information, and communication. Clause 8 is the operation, deliver these services safely on a day-to-day basis. +9, performance evaluation in one word, measure, audit, and review your service management system. And in one word, +10 is what? Improvements, which is saying fix what is broken and keep getting what? Keep getting better. All right, so do you have any question? Do you have any question? We've looked at the entire standard. Right? We've looked at the ISO 20000 standard, no, the structured way by which we should now deliver those good services that we've identified at the start of our class. Do you have any question? You can raise your hand. You can ask in the chat. Okay. I believe there's no question. All right, so on my screen here is just key takeaways that I want you to take from this class. Like I see Mr. Ismail's hand is raised. Please, you can ask away. Okay, I can see we have, okay. Please ask your question, please. Mr. Ismail, do you have a question? I can see your hand is raised. Okay. All right. In the absence of no question, I'll just leave you with these few takeaways. You can screenshot it, you can jot it somewhere, but it's just what I want. If there was nothing you couldn't hear from the start of the session, this should cover everything that I've talked about today. So in the absence of no question, I will hand over back to our coordinator, Mercy, to take over from you. So thank you more, everyone, for having me today. Thank you for your time. And do have a lovely day.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you. Please, everyone, let's appreciate him. Despite his health, he still was able to take today's class. Please, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so we will be going on a short break, but this time around we will give you up to 12:10 p.m. Nigerian time. I hope that is okay. Okay, so Victor, people are saying thank you, wishing you quick recovery. All right. So while we are going on break right now, I'll just take a few announcements. So for some of you, please, you can end the recording for now.